Okay, I think I'm gonna get started. Off the bat, I'll just let everybody know that we are recording these sessions, and the recordings will be sent out after the fact. Patty will be sending them. She'll also, after is complete, be sending out a link to our YouTube page so that you can watch or listen to any of the recordings that were for sessions that you did not participate in. So having said that, we'll kick things off. So this is the training session to look at 5.0 content for testing training. So looking at things like creating task workflows and scenarios, importing those things from our global content into your domain. Also, getting content from Excel into TransIT. We no longer do importing. It's now all done copy and paste from Excel right into TransIT. And then also looking at managing and executing rounds of testing and the reports that are available inside TransIT. So the intention with our training sessions is to have them all be hands-on. So we do have everybody set up in the demo domain for TransIT. So if you're looking at my screen now, or if you look in the chat as well, I've put the link to our demo domain in there. And you'll be able to log into our demo domain using your current email address that you normally sign into TransIT with. And everybody has been set up with the password TransIT5. So just for when you're logging into the demo domain, it will be the password TransIT5. Once we go live with the 5.0 version of TransIT, which is going to be happening on May 29th, then you will be once again logging into the same production URL that you normally log into with your same username and password. Another note, I know that from previous calls, people have used the link from the chat to open the URL, and it's opened into Internet Explorer. Internet Explorer is no longer going to be supported by TransIT, and that's based on the fact that Microsoft is really kind of gearing away from Internet Explorer in general and moving and has moved up to much more of a focus to their Microsoft Edge. So again, if you're signing into this domain and you sign into Internet Explorer, you'll likely not see everything that you're supposed to see, which we did experience from our very first training session. So make sure that you're signing into a different browser type. In addition to that, if you have any questions or if you need me to go back over something, please just call out. It's tricky for me to be monitoring the chat while I'm doing this because I am doing a couple different monitors with a couple different screens going on. So please just at any point you need, call out and I'll definitely assist you with any of the questions that you have. So having said all that, we're going to now start by signing into TransIT. So you're welcome to walk along with me and do the clicks as I do them as well, or if you'd rather just sit and watch and do the playing in TransIT after the fact, that's entirely up to you. The domain will be open for you to use between now and May 29th. So let's say after the call, you're real keener and you want to be playing in TransIT between now and May 29th. You're welcome to sign in at any time to do whatever it is you'd like to do. One thing to note is that anything that you do inside the demo domain is not going to carry over to the production domain once we do our data merge. So anything that you do during these training sessions, it is going to be wiped out before the live version is turned on. So while I certainly encourage you to be creating content so that you're comfortable with all of the clicks inside TransIT, there's no need to be documenting things that are really meaningful and that you're hoping to use later down the line because they won't be available. So I'm going to start off by signing into the demo domain with my email address and the password TransIT5. When I do that, and when you do that for the first time, so if this is the first session that you're attending, the first thing that you'll see when you sign in is the terms of service screen displayed for you. We have the Make Solutions privacy policy there, as well as the terms of service. So both of those are available as PDF documents for you to review, should you choose to do so. And once you are ready, you can select to accept the privacy policy and terms of service, and then click accept. Once you do that, signing into the demo domain, you won't have to do that again. However, when you do sign into the production version of TransIT 5.0 for the first time, you will need to accept the terms of service at that time as well. Just a disclaimer off the bat, if I am referring to how TransIT is currently in our live production domain, I will refer to it as 4.x. That's how we refer to it as Make Solutions. And if I'm referring to TransIT, how it's going to be as soon as we go live on May 29th, I will be referring to that as TransIT 5.0, just so there's no confusion if I'm going back and forth between those two things. So the first thing I'll point out, as soon as you sign into TransIT, you'll notice, of course, that it looks quite different than it looked when you signed into 4.x. We have gone to a much cleaner look, I would say. Far fewer icons are going to be displayed on all of the different screens. And the majority of all the functionality that's available to you is done from a right click. So that's either a right click from your header bar. So when I say header, I'm talking about this blue bar. So you'll have your actions from right clicking a header bar, or you'll have a different set of actions that's available when you right click an item that's underneath that particular header bar. There's going to be very similar options across all of the different screens, but obviously there's slightly different functionality depending on where it is that you are inside TransIT. So when you hover your cursor over any of the header options, you're going to see that in the right corner, off to the right, there's a filter icon that's displayed, and then there's also the sort icon that's displayed there. So you can click the sort if you wanted to sort either alphabetically or reverse in alphabetical order, or the same how it used to work with the updated field. If I click it once, it's going to bring the oldest items to the top, and if I click it a second time, it's going to bring the newest items up to the top. Also, as previous with the 4.x version of TransIT, when you hover your cursor over an item from the updated column, it is going to tell you who and when that item was created and who and when it was updated by last. So if you're looking at a task and you want to see who it was that last made changes to that task, you just hover your cursor over that updated column and it'll tell you exactly who it was that last made changes to that task, for example. If I wanted to use my filter option, I can either right click and select filter from the right click dropdown, or I can click the filter icon as well. So let's say I want to filter to only show the current state project. I've typed current state in there, and now it's filtered to only show me the current state project. So again, that's going to be the same, that kind of functionality is going to be the same on all of the different screens inside TransIT. If I want to get rid of that filter, I would simply just click on the filter again, delete what's there, and then it once again is going to restore all of the different options for me. Pretty basic functionality there. So the first thing, aside from that I'm going to point out is that in the top right-hand corner, In 4.x, you had a gear icon that was displayed beside your username. So that gear icon has gone away, but your name is still in the top right-hand corner, and you can still click on that link there. When I click on that link now, it takes me to the user settings page. So in 4.x TransIT, when you click that link, all you did was change your password. Whereas now when you click that link, it brings you to the user settings page. And the first component of the user settings is the email and SMS notification settings. So you would just click the box if it's not checked for you to turn on email notifications for yourself. By default, it's going to put your username email address into the email sent to field. However, you do have the option to free type into that field if for whatever reason you'd like to have email notifications sent to a different email address instead. It also does inform you of that. If you hover your cursor over this icon here, it'll tell you that it can be different from your login email address. For text, for SMS text messages, so that is functionality that is not going to be available right when we go live on May 29th, but it is functionality that will be coming soon. And so, of course, if you're wanting to turn on SMS notifications, you would click that checkbox and you would type your phone number into that field there. It is helpful if you put your your phone number into that field, even though it's not live just yet, because it does populate into the roster. So during a round of testing, let's say, since it's much more common now that we're doing testing remotely, so people aren't necessarily all in the same room together. If you fill this out, then people during testing have an option to view the roster to see a contact phone number if they are needing to reach you for whatever the reason may be. And so the notifications would come to you either if a issue has been assigned to you. So an issue can be an issue from plans, an issue from testing, or just an issue that was logged for your organization as a whole. So anytime if you have the notifications turned on, anytime an issue has been logged that's assigned to you, you will receive an email notification to let you know that an issue has been assigned to you. And then, as I said, in the future, we will have that available by text message. So you'll have the choice of either doing email or SMS message or doing both, whichever you're most comfortable with. The next section here is roster. So your roster status, it's up to you whether or not you decide it's important to update your status, your roster status on a day-to-day basis. And that obviously can be something that's decided at an organization level as well. If you do not change this field when you sign on, it will just retain whatever your last roster status is the last time that you signed in. It does not prevent you from doing anything. All it does is it generates to the roster so that people know what it is that you're up to inside TransIT on a given day. The next section here, the next spot here is positions. And so positions would be associated to testing. So it would be the positions that you are acting as for a round of testing. As you can see right now, it currently says EDMD and EDMD2 for me. If I was wanting to access and change my positions, I can click this icon here. And when I do that, it opens the position coverage window. So I can type in, I'm going to type in EDRN into this field. So I typed in and I pressed enter, which is standard all across TransIT. I could have also clicked the icon here, whichever you're most comfortable doing. I'm going to then select the EDRN here and click save. And so now you can see that for positions, it's now showing EDRN and EDRN2. You don't have to select the positions in the user settings window, you can wait and do that under the testing window. And I will, of course, show that when we get there during this training session. And then, as has always been the case, you can change your password from clicking your name in the top corner here, and it's still a password, and repeat the password. And there are still no specifications as to what the password needs to be. It's whatever password you'd like to have it as. So as you know, if you've already signed in, your password for now is TransIT 5. There's no reason that you need to change the password at this point in time. Obviously, if you feel like you would like to, you're certainly welcome to, but there's no reason for that because once we do go live with this version of TransIT on May 29th, you will continue to sign in with your current username and password. When I'm finished making all of the changes that I want to make in this user settings page, I would just click Save. And it should have taken me home. When you click Save, it should be taking you back to the projects page, which is also your home page. So anywhere that you are inside TransIT, if you're wanting to get back to your projects page, it's just clicking Home, which is the same as it's always been in 4.x version of TransIT. If you're wanting to create a new project from the projects page here, you just click the add icon that's in the top left-hand corner. So you will see this exact same icon pretty much on every single screen that we look at inside TransIT. And it's generally going to always be the icon for creating a new of whatever window that you're on. So if I want to create a new project, all that you need to enter is the project name and description if you'd like to give it a description. And then, of course, your project is added to the projects page. If I was wanting to copy tasks from either current state or from an existing project to my brand new project, in the 4.x version of TransIT, it was a number of clicks between clicking either an icon or a link to say that you want to copy tasks. Then you needed to select the link for the project that you're copying to, and then you need to select your task, etc. But the way that you would do it now is I can go, I'll just copy a few from my current state and into that new project that I just made just for demonstration purposes. So I'm going to select the row for the first task that I want to copy. I'm going to then hold down Shift, and I'm going to click the row for the last task that I want to select. And after I do that, I'm going to right click and select Copy. After I do that, I can go back out. I can either click back or I can click home. I can go into my new project here. And I will right click the header in this case. And I will do a paste. There we go. And so that is all it takes to get tasks from one project to another now. So it's less of a an import looking type of feature, and it's just a straight copy and paste now in TransIT, which, as I'll say several times, it's quite standard across all the different windows in TransIT that you can copy and paste using your right click menu items throughout TransIT. So I'm going to go back. And so now I'm back to my projects page here, and I copied tasks from current state into my training project. If I wanted to inactivate this project, I would just right click the project and select to inactivate. It's of course going to give me a warning to make sure I'm wanting to actually do what I'm asking it to do. So I'm going to say okay. And now, of course, that project has been removed from my view. In 4.x TransIT, anytime you inactivated something and you wanted to bring it back, you would click that icon that was in the top left hand corner that was a trash can with a magnifying glass, which everybody seemed to think was the search icon. And so now, of course, that icon is no longer displayed. And so if you're wanting to bring back something that you have inactivated, and this is going to be the same regardless of which window you're on, you're going to right click the header, and then you're going to select to inactivate to view inactive projects, or view inactive whichever window you're under. When you do that, your inactive window is always going to show all of the options grayed out. And so if you're wanting to restore any of the options, it would just be a right click, restore. It's going to be removed from your list, right click the header, and then view active projects. And so once I've done that, now we can see that my project has been brought back to the top. The other change that I can do with my view on this page and any of the pages within TransIT is I can right click and I can select which columns I want to see. So let's say for whatever reason, I don't care about seeing the updated column. I can go and uncheck this updated option here. And now you can see that it's been removed from my view here. If I want to get that back, it's just a matter of going back there and reselecting the option that I had gotten rid of. Those view options, they only are for your current login. So let's say you logged out and you logged back in, it would once again have all of those columns displayed for you. It also wouldn't impact anybody else. So if you're hiding columns, another user is still going to see all of the columns unless they decide not to as well. So you're allowed to really customize, I guess, the view to have it suit however you'd like for things to look. I would also be able to, if I wanted to click and hold this column, I could move it here. So again, I can customize my view by doing that as well. So it really gives you the freedom to, when you're working inside TransIT, to have things look kind of the way you want to customize them to look. So that's everything for the projects page. Now I'm going to move into the tasks page. And so I'm going to do that from my current state. Okay, and so now this is the tasks page. So again, as I mentioned, far fewer icons in the kind of toolbar here than we're used to seeing. And that's because everything's been moved into our right click options. The first icon that we do have is the globe icon, which is for importing tasks and workflows. So when I click that icon, you can see that the window that opens says import tasks and workflows. So now it is a single window that's either accessed from the task page or the workflows page, but it's the exact same window and it's the exact same functionality regardless of where you're accessing from. So I can now import tasks and workflows at the same time, which never was the case in 4.x TransIT. Also, if I was to just select a workflow and not necessarily select all of the tasks that exist inside that workflow, it's going to automatically import both the workflow and all of the tasks that exist inside that workflow, which is great. In the 4.x version of TransIT, you first needed to make sure that you did a search for any new tasks and that you imported any new tasks that weren't inside your build first, and then you'd be able to import your workflow. Because if you imported a workflow that had tasks that were not imported yet, then your workflow would just be missing those tasks altogether, and you'd have to then insert all of the tasks individually, or you'd have to remove the workflow and then go back through the steps of importing the task first and then importing the workflows. So it's made it much more simplified in order to be able to import content into your either current state or a different project, whichever you would like. So we've got the search bar here. We do still, if I hover over some of these columns, we do also have some of the same filter and sort, excuse me, sort options available within this search, this import window. So if I wanted to do a search to import, I'm going to just type a search in here. Even though we are doing an import, you still you're going to want to include global to see any global content that we have. And then I always like to, I'm going to select the workflows, because tasks sometimes on their own are just individual fragments, whereas it's easier to look at the workflow since they're all the tasks put together in the appropriate order that they're completed in. So I have checked my workflows only, and I have checked the include global. So I typed into my search field here, and then I pressed enter. And now you can see it's giving me a return on all of these options. When I do that, you can see that there's two icons that are displayed beside these workflows. This first icon is showing me that it is a global workflow. It would be, if it was just a task, it would still show that for just global tasks as well. The next icon is a workflow icon. So it's telling me that this first workflow here is both a global workflow and is a workflow as opposed to just a task. However, when I look at the row below it, it is the same workflow, so it's 1577, the same workflow. However, one is the workflow that is from our global content, and the other is the one that is already existing in my current state. So if you are curious about what content's in global, and if you go to create, let's say, a new task or a new workflow, we always recommend that you first do a search on and see what exists inside global in case what you're already trying to document exists, because our kind of philosophy is that it's always better to start from something that exists than to create everything brand new. We'd rather save you time if the content already exists. So when you're looking at that, you're going to want to look to make sure that you're not, that you don't need to import anything that's already existing inside your environment. If you do happen to import a workflow or a task that already exists, the system does already know that that exists inside your build, and so it's not going to actually import that. So you'd be able to select whatever it is that you want to select from the import window and click import. You could also, if I wanted to filter this, so let's say I want to filter, so I've done my search on appointment, I've selected workflows only and include global. Let's say I only want to see the options that are for Cerner. I can type into that filter. So I click the filter icon, typed in, and now it's giving me all of the workflows that are for Cerner, and that it's giving me both the ones that are already in my build and ones that are available from global. So you can go through that list and see what you want to import into your organization. And again, it's the same window that you're going to access whether you're under the task page or under the workflows page. So for now, I'm just going to say I'll just select one. Anytime that you select to import something, you're always going to get this window that tells you that the import is going to happen in the background. So in 4.x transit, if you were, let's say, importing a large number of tasks or workflows, it would sometimes take a minute or two for that content to actually be imported. And while it's importing, you're kind of stuck on that screen waiting for it to finish what it needs to do. Whereas now that functionality is just going to run in the background and allow you to continue moving on with whatever it is that you're needing to do inside Transit. So all you need to do, of course, is to just accept that that dialog box, and then it's going to bring you back to the tasks or workflows page, depending on which you're on, and it would import the content that you were asking for it to import. The only other icon we have on this screen is the icon for creating a new task. So if I was to click to create a new task, the new task window is going to open. I can select to create that task for current state, or I can select to have it created for another project, whichever I'd like. I can, as usual, give my task a name. I'd like to give it. A small change that you'll see in this window is that you used to select the service, then the subservice, and then the vendor. So the order of those things has just been swapped a little bit. So now you select the vendor first, then the service and the subservice. So I will select, just select Microsoft for here. So these fields aren't mandatory. I mean, you should always be selecting a vendor of some sort, even if it's a manual task. So you should always select a vendor. But service and subservice, they're not necessarily things that you have to select, only if you are creating tasks that are very specific to a single service or subservice. You can give the whatever description you'd like. And click save. And so that task has been created, and now it's directly taking me into the task steps page. And so again, slightly different look now, and still a familiar icon in the top left-hand corner. When I want to create a step for my task, I would click this same icon. A few big changes when it comes to task steps is that you no longer have to select a role. So in 4.x transit and every single transit we've ever had, you always selected a role. And so role was kind of the global term. And then for each client, you would create the specific positions that you have at your facility under each role. And so at the task level, you would be selecting which roles could be using that task. Whereas now that's gone away. So you do not select a task a role or a position. When you go to use that task either inside a workflow or inside a scenario, you will have the availability of selecting any of the positions that exist inside your organization. So then you would, of course, go through and select whatever the product and applications are that you're wanting to select. And you would type into your action field. We still have our details link that you can click as many times as you need. And it's still, the first time it's going to be just details, and the second time details too. And if I continue to click it, it's going to continue to give me details with more numbers. But now we've also added this this drop-down list that is going to give you these are all of the header fields. So let's say in my task, I want to include the header field for address. all I would do is I can either select from this drop-down list, or if I want to type something more specific, I just type P, and now it brought me everything that starts with P. And so all I would do is select, and as soon as I do that, it puts that header field inside my task, inside the brackets. So just like you've normally had to type that information into your task, now it's just a matter of selecting it from the drop-down list. That should save you a little bit of time there as well. Those things can be selected from both an action or an outcome. So it'll work the same way there. One thing when it comes to fields that are header fields, if it's the second of something, you do need to type a second number, the number 2 or 3, whatever the number is, into that task. So I could select, I could try to select address or phone number, for example, multiple times in this same step, and it's going to just always give me the same field. So details still assigns the number based on the number of details fields, but the header fields do not assign a number. So I can add whatever I'd like to my task and click save. So that's quite pretty much the same. And as I showed, all of these still have different options from the right click menu, either from the header giving a certain set of actions, or from within the steps. If I right click, it also gives me another set of options. You'll also notice that besides some like copy and paste, it does say in brackets Control-C. So in 4.x TransIT, you always had to do everything by, either an icon click or some kind of click from the mouse. But now you do have the capability of doing a Control-C and a Control-V instead of using your cursor. So if you're someone who likes to Control-C and Control-V a lot of things, that is still available to you. If I wanted to change something, so I didn't want to have to open the whole task steps window, I just wanted to change something individually, I can right click and I can select change. And so let's say I want to change the application. When I do that, a window opens that only gives me the field that I had right clicked and wanted to change. So I can now select a different application and it'll make that change for me. If I had multiple steps, so I'm just going to duplicate this so that I've got a few different steps for you. So the same would happen if I wanted to make the change to multiple steps at a time. I would select the first one, hold down Shift, and select the last one, which would select all of the rows. I can right click and then I can select to make a change. So I'll just keep going with application. And now I can make a change to all 3 of the steps. So in 4.x TransIT, we had the copy, move multiple options. That was a hyperlink and you had to do a select there. Whereas now it's just the select using your shift to then click the last one as well, and a right click to make those changes. I'm going to go back to my tasks page. We have removed the binocular icon for searching for a task and also the advanced search option. The reason for that is because now when you click this drop-down list, you can decide what you want this search field to be looking at. So you can have it look at any field, so whether that's the inside of the task or the outside of the task. So any field for the task. You could have it look at the name, number, description, the service, subservice, or the vendor. So I can type into this field here. I will type visit, enter, and I can press enter, or I can click the search icon here. And so now it's brought back all of the tasks that that had visit, comma, enter either inside the task step or in the task name or description. When I hover my cursor over the description column, you can see that it shows me exactly what the steps are inside inside of the task. So for .xtransit, it was a show link followed by a hide link. And so now instead of having to click a link to see what's inside a task, it's just a matter of hovering your cursor over the task to see exactly what those steps are. Let's say I want to filter this further. So I've searched on visit, comma, enter, but I only want to see the tasks that are applicable to Cerner. I can type into this field here. So I've clicked my filter. And so now it's looking at all tasks that are visit, comma, enter, and that are Cerner specific. So that's what we've done instead of using the advanced search. Something new that you'll notice on this screen is we have this numbers column. So one of the icons that has disappeared is the icon that you would click to show where each task is used inside a scenario. So instead, that information is listed in this numbers column. So for example, if I hover my cursor over this number 5 here, it's telling me that this task 457 is used in all of these different scenarios. If I was to click on the number, so the number is a link, if I was to click on the number, it opens me to this open scenarios window, which gives me all of these scenarios that the task is used in, and they're all actionable links now. So I'm going to click on the first one here. And now that's taken me inside my scenario. So at the moment, it's not taking you to this specific spot where the task is located, but I have already logged something to say that it needs to take me directly to where my task is located. So for .xtransit, we had the star that was displayed, and then the task was displayed in bold. So we don't have that at the moment. We're going to replace that functionality with something new for 5.0. But for the moment, what you can do, so I know that the task that I was looking at was task number 457. So I can use my filter here and I can type 457. And so now it's showing me exactly where that 457 task is located inside my scenario. So I will go back. So I have clicked back and now it's brought me back to my task page. So if I wanted to copy steps from one task to another, that functionality is still available. So I'm just going to go into this task here. I'm going to say I want to copy both of these task steps. So I'm going to select, hold shift and select the last task step that I want to select. I'm going to do a right click and I'm going to copy. Then I'm going to go into my other task. Oops, I go back here. So I'm going to go back into my task that I had just created. I can either right click the header, and when I do that, it gives me paste to end. Or if I wanted to right click above one of the steps that are already existing inside my task, I could do paste above. So if I had selected insert above, that would assume that I'm trying to insert a brand new task step. But in this case, I had copied steps from a different task. So I want to, I'll just say paste above. And so now you can see that it has pasted these steps from the task that I was in previous and pasted them into my task here. So I will go back. So again, from this page here, I have the filter that's showing for all of the different columns. I could do multiple searches. So let's say I want to only look at the tasks that are nursing. I could select multiple different options. So I will do medical staff office. And I can do earner. There's no. Save. Okay, it's taking, it's not really thinking appropriately at the moment. It's telling me that there's none of those as options. See if I search is not working. So one, I guess, disclaimer I'll give you is that there are still a few little bugs that are happening that we're still working on that we'll have fixed for when we go live with this. But it is still a demonstration domain, so that's why I guess there's a few little hiccups that we'll have, or that you may come across when you're playing. That's all of the functionality really when it comes to tasks specifically. Was there anything that anyone wanted me to go back over before oh, sorry, one thing that I didn't mention. When you go into a task, you also no longer add an interface transaction at the task level. So interface transactions can be added inside workflows, or they can be added inside scenarios, but they are no longer added at the task level. So you won't see that in any of your kind of right-click options. But if there's no questions, then I will move on to workflows. Okay. So the workflows page here has the same two icons that we saw on the task page. As I said, this icon is still going to function the exact same way. It's the exact same icon and the exact same window that you get when you open from the tasks page. When you hover your cursor over the description, as I showed from the task level, it does show you what all of the tasks, the task steps, sorry, the workflow steps are when you hover in the description column. So in 4.x Transit, if you clicked the show link that was there for a workflow, it would show you a list of the task name and numbers that are listed inside your workflow. Whereas now it actually, when you hover in the description column, it gives you exactly what those steps are. So the reason for that is because when I click on, when I click on a workflow name, it takes me to the workflow steps page. In 4.x Transit, when you clicked on the task or workflow, the workflow name, it gave you the workflow tasks page. So there's no longer a workflow tasks page, and there's also no longer a scenario tasks page. It's just the steps view. So that's really the view that's most important anyways. So it takes you directly inside to see the steps. I will go back out for a second. So same comes with the search. You have the search options to search any field, the name, number, description, or the vendor. So there's no service or subservice listed here because we don't add a service or subservice at the workflow level. So I'm just going to do a search on visit and comma and press enter. And it's returned all of these workflow options for me. And then I'm going to go here and I'm going to do Cerner. Sorry, I'm very Cerner biased. And so then I do that, and then it gives me all of the workflows that are specific to visit, comma, and have the vendor of Cerner. It does have the number column over here. That does give you, when you hover your cursor, it does give you the same number and link to show which scenarios the particular workflow is used in. So I can, again, click on this link, and I can then from the Open Scenarios window, I can click on the scenario name. And that does take me into my scenario steps. Again, it doesn't take us directly there yet. It is logged, but then we can use our filters here to search for where that workflow is. So I've typed visit code and it's given me this. This was the workflow that I was looking for. So I can select that and it shows me exactly the steps for the workflow that I had clicked on. So although it doesn't take you directly to where those steps are, there is functionality there to help get you there right now. I'm going to go back to my workflows. And so again, if for some reason I wanted to get rid of any of my columns, I can use this to get rid of columns from my view or hide them from my view. I could also do a multi-sort on my columns. All that's pretty self-explanatory. There's the page size all option here. So in 4.x Transit, you had the option of displaying 30, 100, or all rows per page. And then you also had the option of selecting page numbers. We no longer have those. We do have at the bottom, it says the page number we're on, how many pages there are, and you can still switch between different pages. Otherwise, if you're wanting to view everything all on a single page, you can right-click and select page size all. And so again, that page size all is going to be across the majority of all the pages across TransIT. So I did that, and now you can see I've got one page of one, and then quite a few more options displayed on this single page. If I was to go into a task, oh, sorry. I'm going to do a search so I can find one that is being used in a scenario. So if I was going to right click and edit the task, when I do that, it gives me this disclaimer or this notification. So I was trying to edit this task step or this workflow step, and it's telling me that the item that I'm trying to update is currently being used in these scenarios. So it's just a warning to say, hey, if you make a change to this task, you need to understand that the change that you're making is going to affect these scenarios. So you need to make sure that the change that you're making does apply to all the places that the changes are happening. And so that's a nice new piece of functionality, because before, although there were ways to figure out which scenarios a task or workflow was being used in, there was no warning to tell you, hey, just so you know, if you make a change, you're affecting all of these different places. So it's a nice little notification. It doesn't stop you from making the changes. You can still, if I was to click continue, it will still open up and allow me to make those changes. Another thing that it did is it opened a separate window. So you can see now I've got two different tabs. So the one tab is going to be the workflow that I was just in, and the other tab is going to be the step that I had just asked to update. So I can, I'd be able to go back and forth if I needed to. I can make all the changes that I want to make inside my my task step. And when I finished, I can just click the to close the window and be right back inside my my workflow again. And I could do a refresh at the bottom, and it would show me all of the changes that I had just made to that particular step from the workflow. So just like at the task level, you could make changes to multiple things at once using the select and hold shift and select again. That's still available at the workflow level. So I could select change and I could add a position. So I mentioned that at the task level, we no longer assign roles. But if I wanted to say that this workflow specifically is for a particular position, then I can assign a position to a workflow, which would just, I guess, save me a single click when I go to use the workflow inside a scenario. So there's certainly nothing to say that you have to select a position at the workflow level. But if you're someone who uses the exact same workflows over and over again, and you know, either every time I use this workflow or 9 times out of 10 when I use this workflow, I'm always the reg clerk, then you can do a select, hold shift and select, right click and change the position. And then when you do that, you can select a position to assign to the steps in that workflow. So again, when I insert it into a scenario, I don't have to be the reg clerk, but if I was the reg clerk, I could insert this workflow without selecting the position of workflow, and it's automatically going to bring that position in because I had selected it at the workflow level. So that is functionality that's currently available in 4.x Transit. It's just different clicks to kind of get there. I can also, if I wanted to copy and paste steps from one scenario to another, it's the same that I showed you from the tasks level. So it's just selecting, right click, and I would do copy, and then I would go insert inside the workflow that I'm wanting to paste the steps into, and I would select to paste. I could also choose to copy. So let's say I inserted tasks into this workflow and realized, hey, they don't actually belong in here. They belong in this other workflow. I could cut them from here, and then I would go into my other workflow and select to either paste above or if I went to the top of the workflow and right-clicked the header, I'd be able to just paste to end, whichever is the appropriate option in this case. So I did also mention that we no longer have interface transactions added at the task level, but they can be added at the workflow level. So if every time I have this workflow done, I know that there's an interface transaction that I wanted to have turned on, I would right click and I would select add interface. So let's say that every time this happens, I need these 3 interfaces to be added to my workflow. So I clicked the add interface and it opens my add interface window. I do have the same capability to search, or if I want to filter my options, there's some filter options as well. If I clicked this first checkbox here, as you'd probably expect, it would select all options that are available. So in this case, I'm just adding these 3 options here, and I'm going to click save. And when I do, you can see that they were added to my workflow in this interface column. I could just click the red X if I wanted to remove one of the options. And I do have the option to type details into my interface as well. So in 4.x TransIT, when you had a details field that had been added at the task level, when you look at it from either the workflow level or from the scenario level, it previously had details displayed in brackets, whereas now instead of the details in brackets, you've got this click to add details link. When I do that and I click on the link here, it's going to open the add details window. I can type into the window and click save, and it's going to enter that information in. And so as usual in TransIT, if you add details at the workflow level, anytime you use the workflow inside a scenario, it's going to bring in those details as well. You can still type in those header details fields as well. So let's say I wanted to this in oops. I can still do that as well, as we've always as we had added recently or not too long ago inside TransIT. And so that is of course going to tell when it's used in a scenario to pull it from the header. And so again, I could have done that in my interface transactions. Let's say I just do sorry, Stephanie Ham, are you still on this call?
Yes.
Okay, so I don't know if you typed in the comments, but I'm not looking at the comments because I've got kind of a lot of windows and stuff going on, so I apologize if you did type into the comments and I missed your comments. But I see that that you sent me a message saying that you don't have a scroll bar.
Yeah, I had to minimize my window, and when I did that, I lost the scroll bars that show me the bottom, and I was actually just providing it as feedback, not as an issue with training.
Okay, no, I wanted to make sure that I checked in with you just in case. Is anybody else experiencing that you're not seeing your scroll bars? It's just important for me to know so that if I'm passing this feedback on to our development team, that I know if it's something that's happening to multiple users or if it's something that's just happening to a single user. So not trying to single you out either. But I'll certainly follow up with that issue when I'm finished here. But thank you for letting us know. But that does bring up a good point. We are still in our demo domain. If you do encounter anything during training that's not really as expected or you believe to be a bug, please feel free to either email myself and Patty Marshall directly, or you can also email support@makesolutionsinc.com, and we will definitely get back to you and follow up on whatever the issue was that you were experiencing, because we want to make sure that one, we're addressing all the issues, or two, working with you to make sure that if there's a workaround, we can work with you to get that to you. But thank you. Okay, so I had opened the details window from accessing from the interface column here, so it's going to look the exact same. So I'm going to say that this interface is going to want to see the patient name, for example, and I click save, and now it's added to the interface column. What I also have available inside this version of TransIT, I could do, if I wanted to select all of the tasks inside this workflow and right click, I could also copy and paste into Excel. And if I do that, I can paste in here as well. I can also export into Excel. If I do an export, it opens this export window. Oops, it's opening on my other screen. Yeah, it's still opened on my other screen. And so that's going to look the same way that it currently looks if you do an export from TransIT. There's another icon that we have added at the workflow steps level, and that is the create a new task from within a workflow. So rather than having to open up the task page and create a task from doing that, I can do it from right within a workflow, and I'd be able to do the exact same steps of creating a step. So I'd give it a name, and all this information saved, and then I'd add all the steps that I wanted to add. But so that is, it was functionality that was added in one of the last versions of TransIT, but now it's just done a little bit differently using this create a new task icon. Another thing that happens when I go to add a task to my workflow, let's say I search my task and I don't see a task that I'm looking for inside my own current state or my own project. You do have the option of including global in your search. So let's just see what happens when I do this search. So it looks like everything's already brought in, but if there were tasks here that were not existing yet, and it was a global task, it would show that same icon that we saw, the globe icon. And so if I was going to add a global task into my workflow, it would do two things. It would both import the task into my my project and my domain, and it would also insert that task into my workflow. The same can be done at the scenario level, and so I'll show that when we move on to scenarios. So that was all the functionality surrounding both tasks and workflows. Were there any questions before I move on to looking at scenarios? No? All right, we will move on to scenarios then. Okay, so the only icon I have here when it comes to scenarios is this icon to create a new scenario. I can still use my same kind of filter and sort options. And so when I click here, so for starters, I'm going to focus on if you're creating a workflow from content that exists inside TransIT, and then I'll move on to what it looks like now. So we don't import anymore. We do a copy and paste from Excel. So after I will look at what it looks like to do that. So that would be what replaces our previous import functionality. So I'm just going to, for the sake of it, create a scenario called training 5.0. The scenario number, just like always in TransIT, it's going to automatically assign the next scenario number that is available. You're certainly welcome to type into that field whatever number you want to assign to your scenario. You would then select the category. So we now only have two different category options. So process and functional, which you should be used to seeing. We previously had training, so you could create a training scenario, but we have gone away from having that as an option. And the reason being is that nobody was using it. So we figured it wouldn't be missed if we took it away since nobody was actually using it. So I'm going to then I'll stick with process. I'm going to create a process scenario. I'm going to select to have the project be current state, but I could select the project of a different if I wanted. And then I will click save. When I do that, it is going to take me directly into the scenario steps page. So as I mentioned, we no longer have the scenario tasks page. It's just the scenario steps page, which is a better view anyways, because it's going to give you what your steps actually look like. I can click this icon here to go and start adding tasks to my scenario. So again, when you open this, I've got the option to select workflows only, and I have the option to include global. So as I had mentioned at the workflow level, if I was to insert a task or a workflow into my scenario, it's also going to import that task and workflows into my organization. So the only hesitancy I would have with that is if you're inserting tasks into your scenario without doing a review of them beforehand, they may not quite match your current Cerner build or whichever vendor you're using. But I know with a vendor like Cerner, for example, their applications are quite configurable. So just because we have a task documented in a certain way, it might be slightly different clicks for you at your organization. So you'd want to first make sure that you validated the workflows against your own Cerner build before you start using them inside scenarios. But you do also have that option that when you hover over the description column, it does give you because of how much I have here, it's kind of flashing at me. But if I hover over the description column, it does tell me what the steps are there. So if you're comfortable with what you're seeing inside the workflow, and it is a global, then you're certainly welcome to add that. But so I'm going to start just creating a quick little scenario here. So I've typed appointment, comma. You can see, as I showed before, there's a globe icon, which is telling me that that's a global workflow. And then I've got the second icon that's telling me that it is indeed a workflow, which it should be since I've selected to do workflows only. I can then use my my filter if I wanna. I'm gonna, in this case, search on Cerner workflows. So I'm gonna look for a workflow for scheduling an appointment. So I'll use this this work. Sure, I'll use this workflow here. So I can see that it is both a global workflow and a workflow. So when I select this, it's going to import all the content from this workflow into both my scenario and my content as a whole. So I'm going to then click next. This window needs to go away. Right. Okay. Sorry, we will try that again. Okay, so I'm just going to go with this workflow here. Oh no, I don't want to do a check-in. I will go. Stop doing that. I'm going to go with this workflow here, and I'm going to click next. When I do that, I can select my facility. So I'm going to do Cerner facility. It's going to give me the day number because there's nothing in my scenario yet. It's going to default to day 0, but I do have the option to typing into that field as you've always had if I want to change it to a different day number. Here I'd be able to select the position. So as I said, it's going to give you the full list of positions that you have at your organization. I'll do Schedule as my position. It also allows you to take a moment to review exactly what all the steps are that you're going to be inserting into your scenario. So that's nice. Before it was, you could click the hide and show, but at a workflow level, it didn't really blow out all the steps for you. So this makes it much easier to review what you're inserting beforehand. In case there's multiple of a certain workflow that all kind of look similar, you can make sure that you're selecting the right one before you add it to your scenario. So I can then click save, and it's added the workflow to my scenario. What you can also do, I'm going to do the same search here, and I'll do another Cerner here. What you can also do is, let's say, okay, I scheduled the appointment. Let's say there's some modifications that I need to do to my patient's appointment before I'm able to check them in. So I can select the workflow for, say, modify whichever workflow it is. Oops, doesn't really matter. And then I know that the next thing that I'm going to need to do after I've modified my my patient's appointment is I'm going to need to check them in. So I can then go ahead and select, I'll just select this workflow for checking in my my patient. So then I'm going to click next. So what I just did there is I selected 2 separate workflows in the order that I wanted to select them in. And now it's allowing me to, if you look through the steps, the finishing piece of this first workflow would be here, this line 21. And then you can see that it picks up at 1 again. And that would be the part where you're actually checking the patient in. So I selected 2 different workflows, and when I do that, it's going to insert them into this scenario and show them in this window in the order that I had selected them in. So technically speaking, I could have selected 10 different workflows in the order that I wanted to select them in, and it would show me all of them here. Whereas before, you needed to do each cert and each insertion of a workflow individually. So again, I can keep the, it's going to retain the facility just like it always has. I'll type 1 in here for now. I previously did the scheduling clerk, so it did pull that position in for me, but I could change it if I wanted to. But then I click save. And now it's added those additional workflows, and I can see picking up at day 1 here. So that's what it looks like starting to build out a scenario. So looking here from the scenario steps page, it's still the same as I showed at the workflow level for if I'm wanting to add the details here. And it would be, let's see what the end of this is. If I wanted to add the interface here, I could right click and select add interface. Again, that looks the same as it looked when we were doing it from the workflow level. So I'll just select 1 here. That's obviously not an appropriate one to select, but that's okay. And I'd be able to click to add details there if I wanted to. So again, if I wanted to make an edit to a task, let's say there's something that looks wrong in this first task step here, I could right click and I could say edit task. It's going to give me again that warning to say where the task is being used. So to make sure that the change that I'm making is going to apply in all spots. And then when I click continue, it's going to open my my task and steps inside a separate window. So I could then make the changes that I want to make. I could also toggle back and forth if I want to make sure I'm, I guess, reviewing what's there before. I could make whatever changes I needed to make, and then I would just X out of this window, and you're right back inside your scenario. So 4.x, it was a matter of clicking the task link, the task number link, and it took you away from your scenario altogether, and you could still make the updates and then go back using an icon, whereas now it's done in a separate window, which I think makes it easier. You also, you'd notice that from the scenario steps page, we previously had those black arrows that were displayed along the left-hand side. Those are no longer available because, as I've shown kind of everywhere, it's the, I've selected the first step, I'm going to hold down shift and select the last step that I want to select, and it's a right click option. So when I do that, all of the options that you're used to seeing to make changes to your scenario are now available in this change option from the right click menu. So I could change the position, the day, or the facility. If this was a functional scenario, so this is a process-based scenario, which is why it has the day for me. But if this was a functional scenario, then it would have the section as the option there to change. If I wanted to copy to have additional of these steps inserted into either this scenario or into another scenario, it would just be copy. I would locate the spot that I want to paste either in the same scenario or in a different scenario, and I would use either the paste above option, or I would right click the header and do the paste to end, so whichever is appropriate. If I wanted to move, so we no longer have move, it's instead cut. So that's going to, of course, cut the step from the spot that you had it. So I'll just do a couple here just for demonstration purposes. So I've selected those two. I'm going to right click and I'm going to cut. So because these two steps here are also part of the same task. So task number 191 is these 3 steps. So that's why it's showing a cut beside all of these. So if I was wanting to cut these steps and let's say I'm going to paste them above, I'll just pick a different spot just for demonstration purposes. I can do right click here and I can say paste above. I would also be able to paste at the end from doing the header, which would be the exact same look if I went into a different scenario. So how it looked previously when you were inside TransIT is when you would select to move, you'd have the your screen would then display the move above link in all the spots that are above certain tasks or all of the tasks. But so instead, it's just a right click in the location that you want. So again, moved much more away from icons and links to right clicking and selecting actions from the right click menu. So that's the replacement for all of the multi action steps. Okay, so that is, oh, sorry, I'm gonna, I then want to show you the header. So unfortunately at this moment, I don't have the ability to access the header from inside the scenario steps. It is logged and it will be coming, it's just not available just yet. But so what I would have to do to access my header is I would need to go back to scenarios. And when I do that, I would right click where my scenario name is listed. And I would select edit header. I'm instead going to go into to show you one that actually looks that's been completed already. I'm going to go here and I'm going to say edit header here. And when I do that, we've got the header page displayed here. So it still is going to have all of the exact same fields that were there previously. And if you're looking at a scenario that already existed inside your organization, then all of the details still would have been retained there. It's just going to look a little bit different. So let's say I wanted to add an additional field in here. I would click this pencil icon. And when I do that, it gives me this window here. So instead of having all of the fields listed down the row and you'd have to scroll to find whichever fields you want. And if you're wanting to add an additional field, you had to click that add link. That's no longer there. So instead, when you open to add another field for your header, you would just select whichever field you want from this drop-down list here. So I'm going to type P here, and let's say I'm going to add the patient's last name. When I do that, it gives me this text field for value. And that's added that here for me. Unfortunately, what is not there yet is that you can't do multiple entries in that window at a single time. If I wanted to add my next header option, I would need to click the icon again. That is already logged as an enhancement request. That was definitely something I wanted to see right away. But for now, it is each time you'd need to click the pencil to do a new entry, just like I showed.
Hi, it's Ruth.
Hi.
Ask you a question.
Yeah.
So for the plans that we already have, did someone have to add all the stuff individually, or did they come over at least with all the stuff that we had populated before?
So anything that you're seeing would be stuff that was from before.
That's fine, but I'm saying that if we already had in our scripts that we wanted the MRN and the FIN and the date of birth, all of those are gonna be there with this conversion. We're not starting out with a blank template.
No, no, no. All of it's still, all of the fields are still there exactly as they would before. It's just
Okay.
a different, just a different kind of way of adding them. So if
No,
I
that's
go,
fine. Or if we do a new one, we'd start with nothing in here and have to add them.
exactly. So
Okay.
I will,
No, I get it. I think you've
Yeah.
answered my question. And then my second question is, we have to do it this way right now to get into the edit the header. Once the issue is fixed, where will we be able to access it? Through an icon at the top, or just
it'll be a right click from the header, I assume.
oh, from the header itself? Okay. All right,
So,
thank you.
and so by that I mean like when you're inside your scenario, and I'm making this assumption based on the fact that this is how every other action really seems to be getting added. I assume it'll be a right click from here and that you can view the header from there. It just hasn't been added yet. But when we do have the enhancements available, we'll absolutely send an email out to everybody to let everyone know what's included with all the different enhancements.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. But I would say the biggest takeaway from training is when in doubt, right click, because everything seems to be moved to either right click from the header or right click from within the area that you're working. So I will go in and look at it from a blank. So because this was a brand new scenario that I had just created, it's completely blank. When I do my pencil, I can add whatever fields I want to add. So I'll do a patient name here. If I wanted to add an additional, so let's say I wanted to add another patient name, for example. If I right click here and I select add another, it assumes that I'm adding another of the same field type that I just asked for it to add. So because I right clicked on something that was patient name, now it's saying patient name 2. And then I'd be able to whatever my new field is and click save. If I was wanting to remove any of the entries, it's just simply a right click and inactivate. Or if I wanted to edit whatever's there, it's edit and edit details. If you're editing a field that's already there, it assumes that you're wanting to edit the value. So it assumes you still want the same field name and that you're just wanting to edit the values within that field. So if you're looking to get a different field name, you'd need to, of course, click the pencil icon and then select whichever your option is from the window here from this list. Were there any other questions before I show you what it's like to do a copy and paste as opposed to an import? Nope. Okay, so we no longer do imports. Instead, it's a copy and paste. So what I'm going to do is I need a blank scenario in order to, or that I'm going to paste into. I could paste into an existing scenario, but in this case, for the demonstration purposes, I'm going to start with a blank scenario. So I'm going to click my icon here. So there's nothing different about this particular step. So I'm gonna renal failure. Again, it's still going to assign the next number, and it's still going to be a process-based scenario, and I'm still going to put it into my current state. And I'm going to click Save. So again, that's put me back into the scenario steps page, and because it's a brand new scenario, I have no steps. Let me. Sorry, I'm just opening a spreadsheet to use. Okay, so I have this spreadsheet ready to go in order to copy and paste. So if I'm wanting to do a copy and paste, the first thing that you need to do is you need to make sure that your header fields are going to match the header fields that you have here. So they need to match all of what's shown here. The task field and the workflow field does not need to be filled in because those are the fields that get populated based on what your task name and numbers are. So of course, when we're going from Excel, those fields have not been populated yet. So you just need to, this step, you still do need to have the column there, because if you didn't have the column there, it's going to paste everything kind of one over. So you do need to make sure that the appropriate columns are there and that the fields that you're wanting to be populated into those columns are done properly. So I've done that. I've got all the same column fields that I'm supposed to have. I'm going to select the rows that I want to copy. So I'm just going to highlight all the rows that I want to copy. And then I'm going to right click and do copy. I'm going to go back into my scenario. And in this case, I'm going to right click my header and do paste from clipboard. When I do that, it gives me this window. So it's showing me exactly what I'm trying to paste into my spreadsheet here. What you can do is you can review this list before you accept the paste and look for things that are displayed in red. So it looks like, for me, because I've used this one, the only item that's displaying is in red is power plants. And so that's just indicating to me that I guess inside this build, it's called something slightly different. So it's going to look for content or items that match what's already there for your build. And anything that doesn't match what's currently existing in your build from your org settings, it's going to just blank out those fields. So let's say in my example here, I didn't have an RN in my build. It would be displaying this in red. And when I paste into my scenario, it would just blank out that field because it doesn't know what you're trying to put in because it's already telling you that it doesn't exist. When it comes to the the products, applications, and functions inside TransIT, it's going to back it up to the next level that it does recognize. So PowerChart, the vendor is, of course, Cerner. The product is PowerChart. The application is Power Plants, and sometimes there's functions underneath Power Plants. So it doesn't recognize Power Plants, but it does recognize PowerChart. So when I paste this, it'll back it up to the PowerChart level. If I wanted to go in and update and look for however Power Plans is created inside TransIT, I would be able to edit that after the fact, but otherwise it's going to just paste everything that it recognizes. So
does it change the color in TransIT so you can easily see it once the paste is done?
It doesn't. It's a blank field.
Okay, it doesn't put in the closest match. It just leaves it blank.
Right, exactly.
Okay,
It'll just be a completely blank field. One thing you'll notice is there's obviously some characters that in this particular window, it's not recognizing. In 4.x TransIT, if you pasted, it still would not recognize those fields, and you would have kind of a bit of a jumbly mess with what you're pasting, which if you've done a bunch of uploads, you may have seen that before. So if I look at this, for example, there's a whole bunch of junk in there as well. But when I do the paste, it will look the way you want it to look. So I feel like I'm satisfied with everything that's here. So the other thing is it's not going to stop you. So although it's showing me that it's not recognizing that red power plan, it's still going to let me paste whatever I ask it to paste. So let's say by accident I had the actions all in the day column and all the outcomes in the action columns. It's going to tell me here that it doesn't look right, but it's still going to allow me to do it. So you just need to be mindful to make sure that when you're looking here that you have everything in the appropriate columns, and then you can click save. So when I do that, you can see that it now looks, sorry, need a mute. So when I do that, now it looks pretty much the exact same as it looked when I had put together a scenario using content that already existed inside TransIT. So it recognized all the positions that I had, and it's backed up to Power Chart because it didn't like what I had for power plans. These fields here, that's where I showed you it had kind of a bunch of jumbled characters, but it does recognize exactly what those characters should have looked like. So that's a big improvement because I know there's been times where I've had to go through several tasks to update them so that they don't have those characters looking all strange. It still creates the tasks, the ZZZ tasks and numbers, just like it normally did when you uploaded a spreadsheet into TransIT. So I know it was asked during one of the calls that I've done, if I was to do a copy from here, paste it into Excel, and then bring it back into TransIT, is it going to still recognize my task numbers? And the answer is no. So if I was to do a copy and a paste here and then bring it all back into TransIT, it's going to duplicate every single task number. So if you're needing to make a change, you're better off to make the changes in TransIT before rather than doing a copy and paste and doing it all separately in Excel. If I wanted to copy all of this into Excel, just like I've shown, it's multi-step, right click, and in this case, it would be, if I go down to Clipboard here, I would want to copy to Clipboard, which then allows me to paste into Excel. And also I could paste above from the clipboard. So let's say I have 2 or 3 different spreadsheets. I could open those different spreadsheets and I could combine them all inside TransIT. So instead of doing the right click and do the paste from header from here, I could also do the paste. I could go here and do paste above from Clipboard. So I'd be able to paste above these steps here. So it gives you much more flexibility when it comes to taking content from Excel and putting it into TransIT. So we still can't have the merged cells. It still needs to be single cells in order to be able to paste them in. And you do still need to have the appropriate header field so that it knows exactly where you want those fields to go inside your scenario. But you don't have the same kind of stop that you had before where it gave you the red errors that you needed to satisfy before doing your import, or in this case, your paste. And you don't need to, before you had 4.x, you had to have a specific version of Excel. It doesn't care about the version of Excel anymore. It can be whichever version of Excel you'd like. And so this scenario is still going to function exactly as a previously uploaded spread scenario would function, or just like a scenario that was built inside TransIT. So I could still go back out and I could right click here and I could start adding to the header if I wanted to. I could also create a copy of this scenario, or I could edit the outside of the scenario here if I wanted to. And of course I could inactivate if I want to get rid of the scenario altogether. So that, I believe, is everything for scenarios. Does anybody have any questions before I move on to testing? No? Okay, so I will then move on to testing. Okay, so the first change that you'll get from this page here is when you click testing before, you had the test execution page that was displayed. So the test execution page has now been renamed, so it still performs the same function. It's just a different name that has been given to the page. You'll see that there are a few fewer icons that are displayed here. There's no longer the position dashboard icon. And the reason for that is because there's no separate dashboard. Instead, it's a filter that's been added to the existing test dashboard. So there's no longer a separate dashboard. If I wanted to view the header for any of my scenarios, I can right click here and I can view the test header. So in 4.x TransIT, there was no opportunity to view the test header from the test execution page, which is now the test rounds page. You could only view it from the test dashboard. So now you can view it from the test rounds page. You still have the same pencil icon that we saw from the scenarios page, and it will function in the same way that I showed you from the scenarios page. So if you're a site who at the build phase does kind of test name or update this field before testing, you could then come here and edit details and give the patient whatever its name is that you want to use for that particular round of testing. You would edit and click save, and it would save that information for you. Okay. Then the testing column, the links that are here are named slightly different. So in 4.x, it says continue testing or start testing. Now the links say continue testing, continue day 1 or start day 1. If it was day 2, it would have start day 2 instead. So just a name change, nothing specific otherwise. If you wanted to put a scenario on hold, it would just be a matter of clicking this box, which then of course puts on hold in the testing column. Whereas in 4.x, it's a link to put a scenario on hold. So just a change to the feature. And that's about it for the test rounds page. You can still add an additional scenario or script from this page. you can right click and you can add a test script. So when I do that, it's going to open the add script window. I can filter. So this is a process round of testing. So if I want to select the process as the option, and then it gives me only the process scenarios to select from. Saving for me. Oh, sorry, that one. Yep, sorry, it was added. So you can still add a test script even though a test round has already been created. And so that's something that you can of course do in Forward.x as well. So these icons are the same icons that are in Forward.x, and they still complete the same function. So if I click this icon, it's still the test dashboard. And so the test dashboard now looks a little bit different. We do still have the icons to display, so it is now just about 3 o'clock, and we're not at least 50% of the way through any of the scenarios for my day of testing. So it's giving me these icons to show. So the yellow means that we're falling behind for the day, and this red one here is telling me that there were steps from a previous day of testing that have not been completed yet. This icon is still the same notification to say that my scenario has not been acted on in at least 10 minutes. The screen still has a refresh, but it's no longer a link that you need to click. The refresh is turned on automatically, so it'll just automatically refresh your screen. The icons to point out here, this first icon is to show view all days. So by default, we're always going to be seeing today's days for testing, or if you have days from a previous day of testing, they'll show up on your dashboard. But if you're wanting to blow it out to show all of the days of testing, it would be this blue icon here, which then adds additional rows to show all of the other days for testing. And if I wanted to get rid of that view, I can just click back. And now we're back to the same view that we were at previously. So the next icon is the position dashboard, or the position filter. So in Forward.x, I believe it's the exact same icon, and that gives you your position dashboard, which is a completely separate dashboard. But now when I click that, it filters my view. So when I had shown the user settings at the beginning of this session, I had selected EDRN and EDRN2 for myself. So it's remembered that, and also when I hover over, it tells me which ones had been preset for myself. And so now it's just showing me the exact same dashboard, but it's got a filter on it now to only show scenarios that have the EDRN participating in that scenario. What else it shows is this weight column. So it says weight 9. So this is telling me that in this first scenario here, the EDRN is up in 9 steps. So let's say from a workflow perspective, you know that you are able to complete the steps. So even though you're not, it says that you're not up for 9, let's say hypothetically you are technically able to execute the steps early. If you're wanting to get to your steps, so you don't want to see the 9 steps that are ahead of you, you want to get just to your steps, you can click from the action column. So if I click the action from the action column, it takes me inside, and I am the first step that is up in the test steps page. However, if I go back, and let's say because I know that there are 9 steps up, let's say I want to review what those 9 steps are before I go ahead and complete my steps. I can instead click the scenario link, and when I do that, it takes me in and it shows me those steps that are before me. And if I scroll a little bit lower, so there's the 9 steps, and then here are the steps that are there for me. So in 4.x TransIT, the action column and the scenario column previously did the exact same thing, whereas now the action column shows you where your steps are, whereas the scenario column shows you or takes you to the beginning of the scenario. If I want to remove the position filter because I want to see the whole dashboard again, I can. Is there a question?
Actually, I was gonna ask you that same thing. Is this the other place that you were gonna tell us to do the position filtering? So keep going.
Okay, thanks. So if I want to, let's say, remove the position filter because I want to view the whole dashboard again, I right click the position column and I can remove position filter. So now that filter is no longer set for me, and I'm seeing the whole dashboard again. So if I was to now, because I've removed, and clicked back, it's that's how I can get back to the view. But if I wanted to remove the filters and then select different filters, I can right click and select position to cover or filter on. So let's say in this case, I'm going to do the EDMD. So if I had not preset under my user settings which positions I would want to cover, if I had clicked this position icon, it would have opened this window for me because I didn't have anything set. So I can then either select this to select all, or I can select them individually and click save. And so now it's updated that for me. So instead of showing me the steps for the EDRN, it's now showing me the steps for the EDMD. And so I, of course, could have selected multiple ED positions if I wanted to. In this case, I just chose to do the EDMD. So I think it's nice now that it's not a completely separate dashboard altogether. It's everything showing on the same dashboard with filters in order to have the view look however it's going to be best for you. I'll just remove these filters for now. So now, so if I wanted to view the header, so I showed you viewing the header from the test rounds page. If I wanted to view it from the test dashboard, it's the same thing. So right click for the row for that scenario and then edit test header. So again, that's the exact same view and the same methods for going about making edits. I can go back by either clicking the dashboard icon or clicking the back button. And I'm back to my dashboard. So let's say I'm ready to start executing on my steps. So I can click the scenario link here. So the first thing I'll point out to you when you're looking at this window, you see that there's this position icon that is displayed beside the different positions. If I hover my cursor, it tells me who the person is that's covering that position. If there was nobody that was covering that position, there would not be that little person icon. So that has replaced in 4.x. It was like a broken up green underline, I think. And when you hovered, it still told you who the people were that were covering that position. And now that's been replaced by this little person icon instead. 4.x, along the left-hand side, you had all of your action icons. And then you also had the black arrows if you wanted to select multiple at a time. So now the only icon that's displayed on the test steps page is the pass. So let's say I'm just going to pass this step. When I do that, the step automatically falls off of my view. So in 4.x TransIT, if you happen to pass a step, because you're not going away from the screen when you pass a step, it would leave you with the view that showed the check mark to say that you had passed your step. And then the remaining steps will be following. But now all of the steps fall off view the moment that you select to have action on them. Let's say I wanted to pass the rest of these steps that are for the scheduler. Same functionality as everywhere else in TransIT. So select, hold down Shift, and select the last. And then right click, and I'm going to pass the steps. And that would be how you pass multiple steps at a time now. So since this is manual, I'll just pass to get rid of that step. But let's say that I wanted to flag a step. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to flag this step. So it's still, as soon as you flag a step, it still opens a window for you to start adding the details for why you're flagging the step. So my note type, it's going to be all the exact same note types that you're used to seeing. None of that would have changed. It's whatever your build is at. So in this case, I'm going to select issue. It'll default there to new, assigned to. I'll just assign it to this person. Reported by. So your reported by, so your assigned to drop-down list is going to be populated based on who's a user in your organization. So in 4.x, you could have typed into that field, but now you do need all of the users to be in that drop-down list. Reported by, let's say you have some outside consultants that are assisting you with your round of testing. They're not going to be actually touching TransIT. They don't have any kind of sign on to TransIT, but they are reporting issues that they're finding. They can be set up as a role, and then they would be available in this drop-down list. And so that would be something that an administrator at your site would need to do. So if you're ever noticing that there's someone that's not available for you to select, you need to figure out who's the administrator at your site, let them know, and have them add that person to your user records. So by default, it does automatically assign whoever you're signed in as to be the reported by. So in this case, I'm just going to leave it because it doesn't really change anything at this point in time. I'll just say, I believe this is issue. Then we have some additional tabs. So the steps tab is of course going to give you what the step is that you're flagging an issue for. And the next tab is the attachment tab. So this is where you would go if you wanted to add a screenshot to show an example to the person who's going to be following up on your note here. So you would just click in that box, select the screenshot that you're wanting to add, and it adds that to your test note. I'm going to then click save. And of course, because I acted, it's removed that from my view. I will then select a few and skip. So we can, of course, still skip steps. With skip steps, we recommend that if there are steps that you can skip because the steps that follow can still be executed on, but the steps that you're skipping is something that you need to follow up on before you're able to execute those steps. So if I was to skip steps and then let's say whatever the issue was that prevented me to complete those steps has now been rectified, I can then click this filter here. So by default, the status column is automatically set to only show the remaining steps for testing. But let's say with my example, the skip steps are now available to be acted on. So I can include skipped in my options here. Obviously, I could select any of these other options as well, but I'm going to select skipped. So because I selected them from my status filter, it's now showing me those on the list here. So I've said that I'm now able to act on these steps, so I can select them all, right click and reset. And if I want, I can then, I guess if they were, I can then pass the steps. So that should be pretty simple. I can then, of course, go back to my test dashboard using the test dashboard icon. Because I acted in that scenario, there's no longer the clock icon displaying there. And it's also showing me the same kind of information that you're used to seeing in these additional files, fields. So pass, flag, issue skipped, and the percentage done. That information is still shown there for you. To access the test notes, sorry, let me go back in there for just a second here. If I was to include the flagged steps, you can see that any of the test notes that were added will display in this test note column. But so I'm going to go to my test report now.
Before you go on, can I just ask for clarity? If you had done the stop action, would that have not allowed anyone else to do any of the other steps, or would it just have flagged it that way?
It would have just flagged it.
Okay, thank you.
So that's not any different from 4.x. It's just a different look, but functionality wise, it's still the same with how you execute the steps inside around testing.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So I clicked my test report icon, so now it's brought me into the test report. So it's still on the left-hand side has all the test note information, and on the right-hand side, it's the issue. So let's say I am wanting to look at this test note here. So I can see if I wanted to open the test note, I would select, so I right clicked and then I open the test note. It's going to show me everything that was logged. So I still have all the tabs available. My screenshot is here if I wanted to open my screenshot. If I wanted to make changes here, so let's say I want to write back and say this isn't an issue, just needs script. I can then change who it's assigned to. So let's say I assign it back to this person, and I can update it to say I'm this person reporting on it and click save. Let's say instead it turns out that that was in fact an issue. I could have gone right clicked and selected issue. So when I do that, it then opens the window for logging an issue. So I can still select all of the fields that I want to select. Say is an issue fixed. And click save. Because I did that, it still has on the left-hand side all of my note information, but now on the right-hand side, it's logged an issue for it. It also, because that was sent back to me, because I assigned it back to myself, it also sent me this email to let me know that that I was assigned to this particular issue. So if you have that turned on in your user settings, then you would get the notification as well. Let's say I want to edit this issue now. I can then select, so I can say I'm this person, and I can type any of the updates. This has been fixed. Oops. And so then that has been updated. And if I was to go back into the issue, I'd be able to see the same information that was there. If I wanted to view just the issue log, it's still the same icon as this issue icon, which then takes me directly to the issue list for just my round of testing. So there's a break here. All of the icons that are to the left of the break are applicable to my current round of testing. As you can see, it keeps loading because there's an auto refresh on this screen as well. All of the icons that are to the right of this break are all ones that are applicable to issues that are for your organization as a whole. So again, the left is for the round of testing that you were on, and the right is for your issue log for an organization as a whole. If I was to right click on this issue, I have a number of different options. So I could edit my issue, which opens it in a separate window. I can see all of the updates that were made and who they were made by, and then the rest of the information pertaining to this issue. I could save details, click save. Let's say I wanted to resolve this issue. So I have worked on the issue. I believe that it's been resolved and just needs to be tested again. If I select resolve from that drop-down list, it's going to open the issue again in a separate window, and it's automatically going to put the status as resolved and allow me to make the changes that I want to make. Same would be the case if I selected close. It's automatically going to update the status of my issue to be closed. And so again, whatever I'd like and close out that issue. Another feature added is, so again, view changes is just for viewing all of the changes if I want to see the list of changes made for that issue. But the feature has been added to follow an issue. So let's say you are not the person who logged the issue and you're not the person who it was assigned to, but whatever the issue is something that you're interested in following because it does affect your work. You can right click and select to follow the issue. And it doesn't really show you anything other than it showed in the bottom corner there that I'm set to follow the issue. And I actually did just receive an email as well sending me the information on that issue, but that makes it so that anytime anyone makes changes to that issue, you will receive the notifications as well so that you know what the status is. So rather than having to come back and check it here, it will just automatically send you via email any of the updates that were done for that issue. There's also, when finishing off with the rounds of testing, there's still the pie chart icon, which still gives you the look of all of your open test notes. And if I had other things flagged in there, it would The pie chart would be a little bit more colorful. And then the same for issues. So the top is still going to be for notes, and then the bottom section here is still going to be, sorry, the, yeah, so it's going to have both notes and issues here for you. And so depending on where I want to go back, I can select the appropriate icon here, or I could click the back button. Is there anything, are there any other questions about either executing on a test round or anything surrounding testing before I move on to issues? No? Okay, so issues, I pretty much just showed most of the functionality surrounding issues, but I did point out that there's some additional icons that were added. So when you select issues from the blue bar, it's going to take you to your issue dashboard, which is the issues that are for your organization as a whole. So looking here, you can see I've got a number of different projects. And so it gives me the issues broken down by project. If I wanted to look at all of the issues, whether they're, regardless of what status they're in, if I click this first icon here, it will then open up and display all of the issues for me. The next icon is the open issue icon. So if I click this, it's going to filter the view to only show me the issues that are open. And so it does say you do see assigned and in process, because those are technically still issues that are at an open status because they haven't been closed or canceled. They're just, I guess, a different level of open. So assigned still means that the issue is open because it hasn't been figured out yet. The next icon is the icon for only the issues that are assigned to you. So I click that, and now I can see there's only 2 issues that have been assigned to me to look at. I can click to look at the most recently viewed issues. I can also set a filter. So let's say that I am the person who is running the round of testing, and I'm closely following the all of the opened issues that are in the status of, or the priority of, blocker or critical. I can come here, I can say I want to see everything that's in open status. I want to look at the ones that are blocker and critical. I can select things for here if I'd like, or I can just do create. When I do that, it's obviously going to filter to all of the options that I had just selected. But what is also available here is if I was to bookmark this particular URL, I can then create a shortcut for myself to be able to get back to this issue list with exactly the filter options that I had previously selected. So that's just a quicker option if you're someone who is very closely following your issue list and you don't want to have to keep coming in and setting your filters every time. Of course, if I wanted to create a new issue, it's the same icon for creating something new that we've seen everywhere else. Still gives me all of the same fields that I have to type into, and I can still click here if I wanted to attach a file, a screenshot of some sort. So again, everything I showed you from being in the previous issue list, all the right click options are still there for you. If you did right click to follow something and you realize, okay, I don't really care about that issue anymore, you would just select to unfollow the issue, and then you'd no longer, excuse me, you'd no longer receive notifications about updates for that particular issue. I also could use all of the different filter fields that are displayed when I hover my cursor over all the different header options, or I could use the sort, same functionality that's all across the rest of TransIT 5.0. Is there any questions about issues? No. Okay, so the last thing that I will show is reports. So looking at reports, there is quite a few less reports than there is in 4.x TransIT. And that would be because there were certain reports that people weren't really using, so we just decided to remove them since they weren't being used anyways. The training material has not been updated yet. That's quite a big work in progress. So when we turn, so on May 29th, when we turn on this version of TransIT in production, all of the old training material will no longer be available. We are working to make sure that we have at least the quick start guide updated right away. So it'll be available under that training material when we go live. So if I wanted to generate a report, I'm going to work with the test planning report in this case. So you can select to do an HTML version of your report. I'm going to click the report button, and that's going to generate the report into Excel. When I do that, it brings me this window where I can select all of the scenarios that I want to run the report for. So in this case, I'm going to just look at the process scenarios, and I'm going to select a few of these scenarios that I want to view it for. After I've selected all of the ones I want, I'll click Run. And when I do that, it takes me to the the report output page. And you can see that it's working away. It's working on adding all of that information to my report here. If you've run the test planning report before for a large number of scenarios, you know that it often takes a bit of time for the report to actually generate. If you did not want to sit and wait for your report to generate, as soon as you click to run the report, you could then click away and continue working into TransIT. You don't need to wait for that report to run. So I could have clicked anywhere and continued with my work, and then when I was ready, I can come and there's this icon that's displayed in the top here that says View Generated Report. So when I click that icon, it takes me to that window that I was just at. It shows me a list of all of the reports that I have generated. So the report that I just generated was this top one here. So now that it is completed generating, it has, I click to open it, so it's open down here for me. Opening, there we go. So the report still looks the exact same way that you should be used to seeing it look. So it opens with the positions tab and the scenarios tab listed in the bottom, and still shows the exact same information that you should be used to seeing. So again, the added feature here would be that the reports can run in the background, and it does not stop you from completing any actions that you want to be completing inside TransIT. You don't have to wait for it. So we are still working on updating all of the reports, so there are a few that don't look ready just yet. but there's none that are new. They're all reports that were already existing inside TransIT, so there's nothing new that you would be looking at here. So that's actually everything that I had planned to share with you today. I am finishing early, so I will definitely sit on the call for as long as people need. If you're wanting to continue playing in TransIT and want me here, if you have any questions or if you run into any issues while you're playing. If not, you're certainly welcome to drop off and take the hour back to use as you wish. So thank you everybody for joining me today. And like I said, please feel free to email us if you have any questions, and to continue to play in TransIT because it is open for you until we go live on May 29th. So thank you very much, everyone.
Patty, can you show me again where you could see that the report was in process, but it hadn't populated yet? So you could go do other things? I missed that.
Sure. So I could have come back to this. When I click this icon here and I come to the report output window, it's going to give me the status of where my report is at when it's generating. So I know that all three of these have finished generating because it says completed. But if I had clicked that icon and come back and it had not finished generating still, it would tell me that it's still in process.
Okay, I saw that one of them said in progress, so, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So I'm going to stop the recording now as well.